All right, we were rudely interrupted during the previous video where we were talking about Zambia's staple foods and then just getting to quite literally the juicy stuff, talking about live caterpillars and the unpleasantness of them exploding as you bit down. So David, you were going to talk a little bit more about the funky foods that you tried and ate, some of which more regularly than others, during your time in sub-Saharan Africa, not just Zambia. So yeah, please pick up where you left off.
Yeah, well, so I was talking about Ifishimu, which are local caterpillars, and there's two types. There's the ones that dry white and black with spikes that you have to chew very carefully, and then there's the ones that dry out yellow, which are quite tasty. Some of the other really interesting foods in that area are flying ants or flying termites, and basically what you do is you take a bowl and you put a candle in it, or some light source outside, and they'll pass by in the night. They'll be attracted to the light, they'll fall into the water and drown. And then you collect them and the wings will fall off in the sun. And then you can either fry them up or you can eat them dried or however you'd like. But they're really quite good, and I've got a YouTube video up from when I first tried them. So if you guys are interested in seeing that, that'll be fun for you. Another interesting food that's a staple and that's extremely important in the local diet in terms of protein are what are called chisense or kapenta. And these are small dried fish that are about a pinky size, so pretty small little fingerlings, and they're harvested in bulk in nets and then laid out in the sun and dried whole and dehydrated and then sold in bulk. And then you buy them and you fry them very, very well and add a lot of salt and then chow down, and they're pretty crispy, unbelievably fishy taste. So if you're a person who really enjoys fish, they're definitely for you because they've got that amazing, potent, overwhelming fish taste.
And how do they smell?
Well, the smell isn't very pleasant. When they're dried, when they're completely dried, they're fine. You start to cook them and they start to rehydrate in the oil and the water, they're well, I couldn't really eat them, so they made me throw up almost every time I had them. I'm not one for that really fishy taste, and crunching through a whole fish wasn't really high on my list. But interestingly enough, Zambian cultures and Malawian cultures aren't the only ones that eat them. I've found them in supermarkets in Mexico, in northern Mexico and Puerto Peñasco, and I also found them further south, towards the middle of the country in Puerto Vallarta. I've found them in Europe, and they're just these little dried fingerlings, so they're becoming more and more popular.
Cool. So what other stuff did you get into? What other, I mean, were there sea urchins somewhere, or I know you tried some seafood, or
well, I think I've had just about everything that comes out of the sea. Seaweed, sea urchins, crabs, shark, sailfin, stingray, eel. Just about everything you can imagine is available in the night markets in Zanzibar. And so then they mix that with the spices that are grown locally on the island, and it is absolutely fantastic. Just delicious. Other kind of exotic foods that I wasn't really expecting are some fruits that are very similar to grenadines, or grenadillas, but not. They have that same firm outer shell, but when they get ripe, they harden rock hard. And then you break them open, and inside is this brown, fleshy bit, and it's called brain fruit. And it's actually really quite good. And there's another one that's similar to it that's got a little bit of a slimier texture that tastes like bubblegum, surprisingly enough.
Is that baobab?
No, baobab's different. So baobab is another really interesting fruit. Once the fruit pod is fallen, you can break it open, and inside is this dried, spongy material with the fibrous inside of the pod going through it, and then seeds. And so what you do is you scoop out the seeds, and they're surrounded by this spongy material, and you can suck on them. And they're very sweet and quite tasty, good as a thirst quencher.
And the baobab trees, they're pretty distinct looking, right? What do they look like?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they are massive around, smooth barked going up, and then just a little bit of a canopy and not too many leaves up top.
And did you try anything, any of the gamier meats like impala or anything like that?
Well, I had kudu, greater kudu, at one of the game lodges that we stayed at during vacation. And I had bushmeat a few times that I don't really know what it was. I don't know if it was puku or if it was another small antelope or deer or if it was something else. I do know that a few times I've had rat, which I wasn't a huge fan of, and field mice, which were actually quite good. So there's a difference. Kosway are rats, and they're pretty big. They're roof rats, so without their tail, they're about almost a foot, and they get pretty big. And so then you butterfly them and you fry them over a fire, and they eat them gutted but otherwise whole. And they start with the head, crunching through it, which is pretty gruesome. Makes it pretty hard to eat. I didn't go that far. And then imbeba, which are the little field mice, and they're actually a very sweet, tender meat, and they're really quite tasty. If you cut the head off and you clean them properly, yeah, it's like eating rabbit, and the meat's almost as rich. It's got that very sweet, marbled, tender taste to it.
That is a very interesting cross-section. You can see videos of David eating some of this stuff on his YouTube channel and access that as well as his writing on davidberger.net. Thanks, David.